Okay, good morning, everybody. We'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order, please. The first order of business, Doug, is there any public comments today?
We have one public speaker, Tom Condescente, on behalf of Joe Chan. I believe he's with the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Chan, and I'm the president of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, a not-for-profit organization charged with advancing the economic development of downtown Brooklyn. Our board of directors includes members of downtown Brooklyn's business community, as well as leaders of the area's institutions of higher learning and cultural organizations. I'd like to start my testimony by thanking the MTA for the recent investments that it has made in downtown Brooklyn's transit infrastructure. The improvements to the J Street Metrotech station and to the Atlantic Terminal will benefit downtown Brooklyn's mass transit infrastructure for decades to come. Likewise, the dedicated bus lanes along Livingston Street have simplified east-west surface transit in the area. We are grateful for these efforts, and we believe that they will facilitate downtown Brooklyn's growth as a dynamic business center to a borough of 2.5 million residents. That said, we know that one item for discussion on today's agenda is the MTA's real estate portfolio. We urge that, as you consider how best to leverage your real estate assets, you create a definitive plan for the reuse and or reactivation of 370 J Street. For more than a decade, 370 J Street has remained predominantly vacant and surrounded by sidewalk sheds. Sitting adjacent to the award-winning New York Marriott at the Brooklyn Bridge and across the street from Metrotech Center and the NYU Poly campus, the building casts a notable blight on an otherwise vibrant section of downtown Brooklyn. In previous years, we were told that the MTA would reoccupy the building, starting with a business center that would consolidate the administrative functions of the MTA's business operation under one roof. We were surprised to hear that the function has since been relocated to 34th Street. Now the building's future remains more uncertain than ever. Fortunately, 370 J Street is a viable real estate asset. Given its central location, nearly 400,000 square feet of office space, and floor plates that lend themselves to a variety of uses, the building could be reoccupied by a number of potential users. For example, 370J would be an ideal location for the Applied Science and Engineering Center, for which the city plans to release a request for proposals later this year. The building's size would allow for a critical mass and a standalone academic institution. Its layouts permit a variety of academic uses, including classrooms, labs, offices, and even student housing. The fact that the facility would require building renovations and not new construction would allow for the realization of the Applied Science and Engineering Center over the relatively short term. We urge that the MTA and the city work together to include 370 J Street as a targeted property within the forthcoming RFP. If the MTA is not amenable to this approach, we ask that you work diligently and expeditiously with the city to identify an alternative reuse strategy. Let us remind you that it is your fiduciary responsibility to return the building to the city if you do not have a use for it and it is not in your long-term operations plan. However, if you do have plans to move staff and operations, we urge you to consider making 370 J Street your destination. We've seen today's media coverage about your plans to relocate your headquarters. This sounds like a good idea. We laud your efforts to capitalize on the value of prime midtown real estate. That said, we'd ask that you think about moving to 370 J Street. The rent's not bad, just $1 a year. You would be located at the epicenter of one of the city's mass transit hubs and atop your most laudable renovation projects. While there may be more than one solution to the reuse and reactivation of 370 J Street, our message today is quite simple. Allowing this asset to continue to go unutilized as it continues to burden your already stressed capital expense budgets makes absolutely no sense. We are confident that given the demonstrated ability of the current leadership to find creative solutions and implement them quickly, that you can identify a responsible strategy for 370J. To that end, the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership offers our support and thanks you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of our minutes of our March 21st Finance meeting. A motion, please.
Motion made.
Second, please. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Doug, would you please take us on?
Sure. There's one change to the work plan. The MTA annual pension fund report is to be removed from the April work plan and added to the May work plan. The responsible parties are the MTA Labor Division and representatives of the various pension fund boards and their pension consultants. Next on the agenda would be the Budgets and Capital Cycle and Budget Watch. So far through April, and some March results, some April results, we're doing a little bit better than budget, probably about $30 million. Technically, we're doing $60 million better than planned, but $30 million of that came from the $30 million in TOA funds the state released to us that was unbudgeted, and that was a partial offset to the $200 million cut that I think you've all read about that was part of the state budget. So I think what I'm going to do is focus on the other operations. We're seeing favorable results in real estate taxes, expenses, and debt service. With real estate taxes, we're actually favorable about $19 million year to date, but 16 of it was that Google transaction in February. So really, we're just a little bit above budget. We're pretty much running flat on that. Operating expenses are running $20 million favorable year to date, and that's in spite of higher fuel costs and overtime and other weather-related costs. And also, there were some expenses that we expected to see in 2010 but shifted into 2011 as agencies were preparing to get ready for the conversion to the BSC in January. There's, on the downside, or part of the reason for that is we're seeing some timing savings now and some underspending, but overall it seems as though that expense story is a good story, and we're looking very carefully at that as we get ready for the July financial plan. Debt service is $10 million favorable year-to-date March, and that's primarily as a result of lower variable rates. There was also an acceleration of a BABS issuance, which resulted in some higher interest costs, but that will result in savings down the road, and they partially offset some of those variable interest costs. The unfavorable part is really just the passenger and toll revenue, and it's not an all bad news story there either, because passenger revenue is $9 million unfavorable year to date, but they got hit very heavy in January with all the storm damage. They've actually been running better, and in the month of March, passenger revenue was $8 million favorable. So we hope that's a trend that will continue. Toll revenue is running about $1 million a month unfavorable, and part of that is average toll is a little bit lower. They got hit in January, and then it seems to me that gas prices seem to be impacting some of the utilization, but that's something we'll be looking at closer. In terms of real estate, like I said, that's pretty flat with the exception of the one transaction, and the payroll mobility tax is coming in very, very close to budget. And those are really the highlights of what we're seeing so far. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Are there any questions? I'd just like to say, I think that the storms between overtime and lost revenue and everything else, you probably had $30-40 million hit here in the first quarter at least. What would you estimate it at, Bob? Just a rough guess, with everything.
Yeah, 40 is what we're looking at right now.
40 million.
Yeah.
So, when you think about it, I mean, that was a substantial setback for us, unfortunately, but, an act of God, what can you do?
Right, and the expenses are net of those overtime numbers.
Right, so really the expense savings that we're generating above and beyond the budget that we put in is still substantial, because we wouldn't have had that overtime, we wouldn't have had some of these other expenses that really hit us. We probably would have saved $30 or $40 million worth of expenses in the first quarter above and beyond the cuts that are in the budget. Am I saying that right, Bob?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to note that transit was favorable by $12 million despite higher fuel costs, despite all sorts of was favorable to budget, rather,
on the
expense side, despite
yeah.
all of the body blows that the agency suffered over the past 3 months. So
The other thing with transit is their subway ridership was 3% favorable for the month.
that's correct.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people didn't take buses, among
Yeah.
other things.
And like I said in one of the earlier meetings, this appears to be at least maybe the first time that you've had a fare hike and you haven't seen a drop-off in ridership, which would be terrific.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to just commend you. This is one of the most valuable pieces, the most valuable documents that we as board members get, the synopsis of things that are going on. So I commend you for the work product.
Okay.
Not only does it comment, talk to you about all the different parts that make up our budget, but it also tells you, if you look at it, something about the regional economy and everything else that's going on here too, because you don't live in a goldfish bowl. It's a very good report, no question.
Well, we
about
thank
it.
you for that report. We'd like to try to get it to you sooner. What we do, we wrestle with is when we release it, but we're trying to get you the most valuable information that we can, and sometimes the stuff, we have so many different venues from which the information comes that we want to get something that actually means something as opposed to just getting you something that's on a timely basis but may not be that useful. So we try our best to get it to you as soon as we can. I believe this month it was only a day or so early, but we'll try to do better than that. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay, Finance Watch is next.
Thanks, Doug. Finance Watch appears on Roman numeral 4-1 of your committee book this month. I have two transactions to report. Both are under the dedicated tax fund credit. The first was a transaction priced on March 23rd. This was a $127 million refunding of previously issued DTF fixed-rate bonds. The refunding met and, in fact, greatly exceeded the board-approved refunding policy. We generated over $10.2 million in present value savings on that transaction, or 7.75% of the funded bonds. And I would just note that we worked closely with the state controller on that to put the savings into the financial plan years, and that's obviously going to help us in the financial plan, and I think I noted that in the email to you. Secondly, we did take out $300 million of our dedicated tax fund bonds that had previously been issued in auction rate mode. As you know, that market has failed. The bonds have been failing at a rate of 175% of 1-month LIBOR, and while the current rates have been low, we did want to take that risk off the table because as LIBOR increases, these bonds will become very costly in that failing mode. And we terminated the insurance policies with AMBAC and MBIA on those bonds as well. And as you can see down at the bottom, that transaction results in an all-in true interest cost of 4.78%. I would note that we had a strong order period for the bonds. We sold over $90 million to retail customers, just traditional single managed account retail investors, and the remainder went to institutional investors. We had strong enough interest that we were able to reprice by anywhere between 2 to 5 basis points at various points in the yield curve on those bonds. The remainder of, sorry. Yeah, thank you. This transaction was senior managed by Jeffries & Company, one of our new senior managers, and Jackson Securities was promoted from co-manager to special co-senior manager. Again, both firms were new to our syndicate that the board approved in December, and the performance was very strong. And of course, Jackson is a MBE-owned firm.
Just I note that we did not have to pay the customary vigorage to the state of New York on the remarketing.
That is correct. On any remarketings, the state does not charge us the bond issuance charge.
That's very kind of them.
Yeah. Pardon me? Okay. All right. The remainder of Finance Watch, the customary reports follow on pages Roman numeral 4-2, all the way up to and including 4-8. I won't go through those, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those at this point. The last thing I just wanted to report is that we do have some existing variable rate transactions with liquidity facilities that are expiring, and I just note that we're working on replacing those facilities. The first is Transportation Revenue Bonds 2002 D2. That's a $200 million facility. Dexia Bank is the provider on that. That facility expires May 27th, and we are working on creating first time what's called an FRN. It's essentially a short-term product that is behaves very much like a variable rate bond, but doesn't need a letter of credit behind it. Secondly, we have dedicated tax fund bonds 2008A. Again, with Dexia Bank. Dexia is no longer participating in the market. That facility, we are contemplating replacing it with 2 letters of credit, one from Morgan Stanley Bank and the second from Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi. Each bank would cover $175 million. Again, that comes out of a solicitation that we went to. While the cost of the liquidity is a little bit higher than we would like, there's ample supply in the market, and we're pleased about that.
I have a few questions about the variable rate report. Those are 2 new names to us, right, in providing letter of credit facilities?
They are.
That's great.
Yes.
One question. It looks like if you add up our synthetic fixed rate debt, which of course has variable rate underpinning it,
Yes.
and you add it to our unhedged variable rate debt, that's $5.42 billion,
Correct.
roughly?
Yes.
And I notice on the schedule on V30, let me find it, I'm sorry, V25, the LOC expiration schedule adds up to $4.6 billion. So does that mean that some of our variable rate debt doesn't have a facility behind it? I'm talking about the disparity between the 5.46 and this 4.6.
There's 500 now with this refunding of DTF bonds. We still have $560 million remaining outstanding in auction rate mode that's failing. About $350 million under 2 Broadway COPs, and then
Okay.
$200 million or so of transportation revenue bonds. So those don't have facilities on them.
Okay, thank you.
And we're
And
sorry.
one other question, the liquidity expirations by year. In 2011, this is on page V27,
Yes.
we've got 1.4 roughly expiring this year, and we're looking at $750 million in the footnote. So is that $600 million differential? Is that going to be taken out with?
No, we would expect that differential, we would expect those banks to renew their facilities.
Do we have a clear indication that they're likely to do that?
We've sent out letters, and we've had some of the banks respond indicating that indeed they will, as we get closer to the expiration date, typically the bank doesn't signal its indication until 60 to 90 days before, and a lot of these facilities roll off at the end of the year. But they've indicated that, subject to credit approval, they would likely renew.
Okay.
So that's so we're taking that as some encouragement that some of the banks will stay in the deals.
And finally, now that we have a broader underwriter pool, we seem to have a lot of concentration in the remarketing agents for this $5 billion of debt into the hands of about 7 different remarketing agents. Will you be looking at expanding the group of people that does our remarketings?
Indeed, we will.
Great.
Yes.
I look forward to that.
Okay. I think we obviously got into some areas of there is a report in the book on variable rate debt. It's an annual report in the work plan. We weren't going to go through that in detail. I would just say that it's here, and happy to take any questions now or at any point after the meeting if there's any questions on that.
Excellent report.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Next are the headquarter and all agency items. There are 2 action items. First is... Oh, we're going to do that first? Oh, I apologize. Charlie Monheim here is to do a report on the BSC.
Thanks very much, Doug. This will be a brief report. As you know, the BSC opened its doors on January 1st. Just wanted to give you an update on how things are going. Some of these slides you saw 2 months ago. The BSC is a shared service center for the MTA, the idea being to combine back office functions that have traditionally been spread out throughout the individual operations and to do them better and more efficiently. The three areas that are being focused on right now are finance, HR, and pensions. Finance is being done in some respects for all agencies. The notable exception is payroll, where bridges and tunnels and New York City Transit are still to be done at a future time. HR is covering just the railroads and headquarters primarily, and the pension area is all of those pension areas that are under our DB plans and MTA control, as opposed to employees who are covered by NYSERS or NYSLERS. This is being done as an efficiency measure, and there is a business case that looks at a 6-year payback, and the major benefits that generate that payback are standardization of business processes, efficient and cost-effective customer service, consolidating data across agencies, consolidating our accounts, and a reduction in paperwork, particularly in the accounts payable area where, as I think I mentioned last time, we receive over 500,000 invoices a year. The intent is for those not to be kept in paper form, but to be imaged and kept digitally, with all the paper being disposed of rather than sent to a storage facility. 2 months ago when I was here, I was talking about this being in the early stages and this being a fundamental change for the MTA and therefore a significant transformation, which is not without its difficulties and pain. We're redesigning business processes. That's a big shift for the MTA. In some cases, those changes have gone seamlessly. In other cases, not so. And in those areas, therefore, there's a lot of effort on the part of employees, both in the BSC and in the agencies, to understand what needs to be done to get those right. Part of the issue with that is that inevitably, when you're doing these things, you're configuring a system that relies in large part on the subject matter expertise of people who are also doing full-time jobs. And you sort of catch their time as you can. You can't stop the operation, but at the same time, you have to configure the new system. And when you go live, people are then confronted with how well the system works or what the glitches are. So there is a learning curve that anybody who implements a new enterprise resource system goes through. We're going through that. Training issues, retraining issues, additional enhancements, additional examination of business processes, but in an environment now where we're relying in many respects on that system to conduct our day-to-day business, so it has an urgency that it didn't necessarily have when it was just in the development stage. It would have been nice if I had flipped the slides, wouldn't it? Sorry. Yeah. Hopefully it was self-explanatory. So in any case, thank you. In any case, that's why they don't let people do this themselves, isn't it? In any case, this is just a reviewing of the kinds of issues that we go through. Data conversion in large quantities from the old system to new. That inevitably doesn't go perfectly, and you have to clean that up. Looking at interfaces with legacy systems in some cases. I think at the bus committee it was mentioned, or was it the Bridges and Tunnels actually, mentioning the impending conversion of timekeeping at Bridges and Tunnels and Metro North to a new timekeeping system, which will then make it easier to interface with the payroll system at the BSC. So I won't dwell on these in detail, but these issues are never over in a single day or a single month, and we're still going through these to some extent. Doreen?
Charlie, with all due respect, some of this is a little wonky, and I'm not an IT person, so I'm not sure I really understand what a work process mapping error is and what the implications of that are in dollars, possible?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there are dollar implications. There are what I would describe as agency time implications. So you take finance, for example. You're in the AP area, you receive invoices. Those invoices need to be put into the system, and then they are going to go to an individual who either is receiving the goods or approving the service. Sometimes you don't necessarily get that right. The person isn't in the system or that kind of stuff. In the finance area, you have a completely new general ledger system that involves people's thoughts on how exactly that system should work, who should be involved, what security they should have. All of those kinds of things now become real, and some of them aren't right. And so in going through that process, people don't have access to the reports they previously had, find that things are going to the wrong general ledger account, that has to be corrected, and all of that sort of takes time and needs to be tweaked, to use a geeky term. So in any case, the current status is that payroll and HR seem to be performing much better than they were. Well, payroll was performing quite well from the get-go. There were some individual problems with, deductions being wrong, but those are easily corrected. HR is now performing quite well. Procurement is performing reasonably well. Main area that we're still having some difficulties is in the accounts payable area, where there may have been a significant underestimate of the volume of invoices that we were actually going to receive. So far, we're probably receiving about 25% more invoices than were estimated, so there's still some backlog in that area. But we're working through that. And then finally, and one of the main reasons for coming here today, as I've told some of you already, the head of the BSC and the executive deputy at the BSC have both announced that they'll be retiring at the end of June. So in order to ensure a smooth transition, I'm taking over the BSC for the time being, both to continue with the stabilization process and to make sure that when we do find the right person to be more permanently in charge, that there's somebody here who knows how the BSC operates and can provide a smooth transition to that person. So I think the bottom line is that the BSC is performing better and better each month, and I'm now taking it over to make sure that that continues and that we build a strong management team at the BSC. Thank you.
Just one. I'm sorry. Just one question. What was Accenture's involvement in all of this?
Accenture's involvement has been in working with the BSC to configure the PeopleSoft system and to provide technical advice about how to create an organization, a shared service organization, on this scale.
In terms of the underestimation of the number of invoices that have to be paid, is that something that they were at all involved in or advising us on?
Yes, they were advising us on that, but
did they not give us good advice on
no,
that?
I don't think that's the case. My sense is that when you look at all of the things that go through the accounts payable system, from $5 water invoices to much larger invoices, that number, at least in the first 3 months, and it may not be possible to generalize throughout the entire year from the first 3 months, that we are certainly receiving a significantly higher volume, and that at the time of startup, that's contributed to some of our issues.
And do you have a sense or date by which you think this will be cleaned up and we will not have double payment of vendors or no payment of vendors?
Yeah, it has never been. There was never a time when we didn't have double payments of some magnitude. I think the fact of the matter is we discover these ourselves, and that's always been the case. One of Mike Vasili's jobs as the internal auditor has always been to review those processes and to make sure that where there were double payments, that we were catching them and getting restitution for that. In this case, some of the double payments have been the result of, again, the startup process, and in some cases, having the same invoice viewed as being from two different organizations with different names. But again, I think it's important to emphasize that we were prepared that that might be a problem and have processes in place both through Mike Facili's group and through Accenture to review those and to make sure that we're catching those and handling them appropriately.
Oh, I'm very happy you're going to be giving this your singular focus, because that leaves me in no doubt that it'll get cleaned up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Charlie. Well, thank you very much. And you'll keep us appraised as we go along, I guess, from time to time.
Yes.
Great. Doug?
Okay, sure. Next, we're going to move to headquarter and all agency items. There are two action items. The first is the MTA 2010 Annual Investment Report. I think you'll see in front of your chairs you were given a replacement handout to correct a small error. Anyway, this staff summary is to provide the board information on the MTA portfolio investment performance for the period 2001-2010 to 12/31/2010, and to obtain board approval of the MTA 2010 Annual Investment Report and the MTA All Agency Investment Guidelines pursuant to the Public Authorities Law, Section 2925.
Any questions? Excuse me, any questions on this, or? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Next, we have a staff summary on MTA Long Island bus operations. And, what's that? Oh, do we need a vote on? Yeah, we need a vote on this. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so we need a vote then on, I guess, acceptance of the investment report. Is that what, Doug, you want to
Yeah.
make the motion?
That's,
Okay. Second, please. All in favor? Thank you. Doug, go ahead.
the next is a staff summary on MTA Long Island bus operations, and our CFO, Bob Foran, is here to discuss that.
Okay. The staff summary in your package discusses that in connection with Nassau County's decision to privatize their bus and paratransit service by January 1st, 2012, the board's approval is sought for the annexed resolution right behind the staff summary, which authorizes MTA Long Island Bus to facilitate the county's transition to a private operator and authorizes the termination of the existing lease and operating agreement between the county and Nassau and MTA Long Island Bus effective December 31st. This was presented to the bus committee and was approved earlier today by the bus committee. If you have questions, I'd be glad to respond.
All in favor, please? Opposed? Carries.
Okay, we have one headquarter report and information item, the MTA Annual Report on Variable Rate Debt. Pat McCoy is here to discuss that.
Again, this report begins on page 5-7 of your book. This is a report that's included in the work plan. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but again, I'm happy to take any questions you have on this report. It's a comprehensive report of our variable rate portfolio, both synthetic as well as natural variable rate bonds that are outstanding.
Any comments at all? Okay. Thanks, Pat. Doug, go ahead.
Okay, still within headquarters and all agency items, we have two competitive procurements for MTA headquarters for a grand total of $426,330.
Motion, please. Second, please. I second it. All in favor? Okay, Doug?
I'm going to move to the agency committees now. There are no...
You all right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There are no agency action items. So with regard to procurements, first would be the Metro-North Long Island Railroad Committee, where there are 6 procurements. There are 5 multi-agency procurements from Metro-North for a grand total of $69,518,694. Okay.
Okay, a second, please. Second. All in favor? Okay.
Okay, there's one competitive joint procurement for the Long Island Railroad with MTA Bus Company for a grand total of $1,329,000.
Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor?
Thank you. Next would be MTA bus operations. There are 4 procurements, 3 non-competitive procurements for New York City Transit for $4,059,915, and 1 non-competitive joint procurement for Long Island Bus with MTA Bus for $115,014.
A motion, please. Second, please. All in favor?
Okay, next on the agenda we have bridges and tunnels. There are 2 procurements. 1 non-competitive joint procurement with Metro North for $1,537,350, and 1 competitive joint procurement with New York City Transit, MTA Capital Construction, and the Long Island Railroad for $126 million.
Motion, please. All in favor?
Lastly, we have New York City Transit. There are 2 non-competitive procurements for a grand total of $2,055,621.
Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor?
We have no items for First Mutual Transportation Assurance Company. I'll just want to note that our February financials and consolidated reports are included for your information in the book as per usual. And that completes the finance portion of the meeting, and Jeff will take over the real estate agenda.
Right, Jeff, before you go, I just, what we're going to hear today is something that, we've all been waiting for and have been aggressively pushing, and that really is more than just a real estate report. I think you're going to find, if you look at it, it's really a 5-year business plan that, of course, has been signed off by the chairman and really details, where we now stand with our real estate portfolio and where we want to go with it down the road over the next 5 years. Obviously, a lot of focus is going to be on the main headquarters building where we sit, but it also encompasses the other properties, some owned and some rented, and it's really a comprehensive plan. I just want to say that as a starting point, we have to see obviously how this all works out and how it's disposed of and where we go, but I think Jeff and the team really have done a great job with this thing, and I think we've really gotten something, at least gotten our hands on something that's been long in coming here, and I'm sure Jeff and his team, with the various consultants that we need, will do a good job in making sure that the MTA realizes the most that we can out of our real estate and that we run it as efficiently as we can in the future. So, Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Shall I do the action items first, so we don't forget?
Whatever you
It's
want.
very quick. We have 3 action items this month, 2 of which are in the book, and 1 of which I believe was handed out. The one relating to Gaelic Park, and unless there are any questions, I'd appreciate it if you give your approval for those.
So, unless there's any questions on this?
Yeah.
Jeff, the Eli's item,
Yeah.
what's there now?
We brought this to you previously. Eli's is opening bread sales, bakery items in the market itself.
Yep.
Upstairs is some storage space.
It's storage.
They took
okay.
less space than they were going to. Now they're going to take some more, and we're excited about this. They're going to put in an oven that will allow them to cook on to prepare the bread on the premises, which will be, I think, great for the customers.
So, have a motion? And a second, please?
Thanks.
Okay, all in favor?
Get some.
Okay. Yes, sure. All right, can we make a note, Secretary, where are we? Doug, would you make a note that,
Yes.
okay, great.
All right. Thanks very much. First, Andrew, thank you for that introduction. I do want to put this in context a little bit. My focus today is going to be on office space, but we have been, as Andrew said, engaged in a very comprehensive review of our overall office portfolio, including more conventional industrial properties and so on. As you know, as we've discussed before, many of those properties, I'd say the lion's share of those properties, come with a certain amount of hair on them. They're jointly owned with other governments. They are encumbered by long-term operating arrangements with other governments. On disposition, if not already, they become subject to some degree of municipal regulation and so on. So where land use changes are contemplated, particularly out in the suburbs, where we're looking at innovative transit-oriented developments and so on, involving parking lots. There's a good deal of local consultation. Specifically, we have been sitting with a task force that's been convened through the mayor's office in the city, encompassing city planning, EDC, DCAS, and talking about all of our master lease properties, including 370 J Street, which does present unique challenges. That building has, among other things in it, some essential communications equipment for the subways and for NYPD, and we're looking at a range of scenarios there, but I do want to assure the speaker that although that is not an integral part of the plan I'm presenting today with respect to our current office occupancies, it is something we're looking at very aggressively. So we think we have an opportunity at hand that we need to seize, and that opportunity has been created in large part by the aggressive cost cutting that the MTA has been pursuing on the HR side. As you know, we've reduced administrative headcount by some 15%, payroll by some 15% in the agencies and 20% at headquarters, and obviously that has very dramatic and concrete implications for our vacancies. We currently have an overall vacancy rate of approximately 12 to 13%. We're not satisfied with that, but that's post-downsizing. Downsizing as you know, is ongoing. There are follow-on moves relating to capital budget employees, and that's all taken into account in our planning. The second element of our current situation is that our density, measured in terms of desks or usable square feet per desk, is somewhat in excess of modern or up-to-date industry standards. As you know, these standards are evolving. At the time that our facilities were designed, I don't think they were designed in a way that was particularly ludicrous in light of then current standards. But there's been a lot of there's been across both industry and government a trend toward greater densities. 175 to 180 usable square feet per desk is now a kind of target that you hear about all the time. And depending on the use and the type of building, that can be maybe a bit ambitious, but certainly 200 is comfortable. And we have overall 211 usable square feet per desk. But most importantly, and I apologize, there's a typo on the slide. Oh my. Our biggest building, 2 Broadway, has some of our lowest densities, and interestingly enough, that's particularly true in the low-rise floors and in part of the floors, I believe it's 21 through 24, which were built out to a particular standard, what we call the Phase 1 standard, and then in the middle of the job, the MTA changed to tighter seating patterns. But we've had that sunk cost at 2 Broadway, and we've been living in with that relatively low density, and we think it's time to do something about that. And then finally, we think this is the time to be looking at, as industries of all kinds are, at in this time of IT and mobility, at desk sharing and other arrangements that allow us to achieve still higher densities over and above, feet per desk, and talk about feet per head that are somewhat lower still. So the basic elements of our plan, and I should say, I don't know whether you've all had a chance to read the detailed plan, but we've laid out all of this out with a good deal of specificity, and I'll look forward to discussing any or all of the details in our report with you as you have a chance to absorb them. But the basic plan that we're announcing today has these basic elements. We have been terminating space leases, managing our space lease portfolio opportunistically, and we will continue to do that. I'll talk in another minute about how we've been doing that. But fundamentally, our idea is to empty these buildings, these 3 buildings that we occupy here, to move Metro North personnel to suitably efficient space in proximity to Metro North operations. To some extent, that'll be in Midtown, convenient to Grand Central. We also have, as you know, a large facility in North White Plains, and we're looking at how many more people we might be able to accommodate in a campus up there, and we don't rule out other possibilities at points in between. But headquarters can be accommodated at 2 Broadway. It'll take some work. We're going to need to restack the building. That will take, a fair bit of careful choreography and some money, but not nearly as much money as we would need to spend if we were to see to the long-term upkeep and care of these buildings. And finally, by vacating these buildings, we will be able to make them available for sale. Let me touch again on the space leases. In the report that we've given you, there are 2 exhibits on this subject. Exhibit C is a list of remaining space leases after we've completed some consolidations that are in process now. And Exhibit E is a list of 8 leases that we have terminated or will have terminated by September of this year, for a net savings of more than 12%, some $2.5 million in our space lease portfolio, and that is net of the new BSC lease that we put in place last year in order to get BSC up and running for the cost savings that have been described. We will, as I say, continue to manage that space lease portfolio, and I've listed for you in Exhibit C the leases in the order in which they are terminable by us acting unilaterally. But I will point out that our space lease portfolio only accounts for about 20% of our space, and it tends to be some of our cheaper and more efficiently used space. Our average rent per square foot is under $25 per rentable square foot, and including the space on 34th Street, which, as you'll recall, we were able to lock in for some 10 years at the bottom of the market. So these, what about 347? What about 341-47 Madison? As everyone here appreciates, I'm sure, and probably most people in the audience, that this is not one building. These are 3 buildings. They have 3 separate lobbies, 3 separate building systems. Each has its own HVAC, its own vertical transportation. They are largely obsolete, these building systems. They will, in due course, require renovation. At one time or another, this agency has prepared to renovate. If we were to do that a floor at a time, which is the only way to do it without, moving out and then moving back in, it's been estimated that that would cost well in excess of $100 million. Some of that work is legally mandated by 2019. That work has not been budgeted for, but I think as we evaluate our space needs and plan for the future, we need to recognize that there's a very real cost looming there if we were to stay in place, which we think in any event is not the right thing to do. But that avoided cost is certainly something to be considered in the calculations. The main thing, though, is that if we were to renovate and remain here for the long haul, we would continue to fail to account for our opportunity cost here. The highest and best use of this site is for redevelopment with connection to east side access, and by vacating the property, we propose to make that happen. I don't want to speculate unduly about the value of the property. I think it's in some sense premature to do that. The market will be the best proof of what the properties are worth. I think in all likelihood we make them available for long-term ground lease, and there's some financial engineering to be done there and so on. But I have included in the report some basic arithmetic just by way of illustrating the order of magnitude of the money that could be involved. We have a total lot size here of the 3 buildings plus the lot behind where the vent plant is being built now for east side access, which total about 25,000 feet of lot area under the zoning. 15 times that is as of right, before getting into any considerations of transferable development rights for which this site would be an eligible receiving site. So if you multiply out 25 times 15, that's 375,000. And if you were to posit that that's $400 a foot, I expect that's conservative, certainly is conservative with reference to past business cycle. That's $150 million. So if you see that money, that number floating around, that's how we derive that number. We don't think that's the value of the property. We think that's sort of a baseline for considering the importance of our unlocking this asset. And I did mention east side access. Interestingly enough, how interesting it is. I expect some of you know, maybe not everyone knows, that the concourse that's to be completed, scheduled for 2016, actually butts up against the edge of our building. The line is between our building and the Yale Club, and it's been designed with an opportunity for connection into this site, which would both be a requisite for transfer of development rights from Grand Central, and a very significant benefit in its own right in non-monetary terms to the MTA. Next steps. We're here today really only with an information item. We expect to be back fairly shortly with a request for authorization to engage a team of brokers and architects to help us put together do the programming and help us to fit out, prepare to fit out the spaces and to see just exactly how well we fit into 2 Broadway, and to help us to find space for Metro North. But I'm not here to do that today. We have an RFP out for those services. Our expectation is that those consultants would not be engaged on a fee-for-service basis, but would be compensated out of commissions. We also have a fairly urgent need to develop a software capability to track our personnel. All the reporting that you've seen here has been pretty laboriously. The numbers have been pretty laboriously assembled manually by going around and counting desks and counting people and reconciling them against lists of people and so on. And although we do have CAD drawings and we do have PeopleSoft to keep track of our employees, the two don't speak to each other for the moment. And that's something we need to be able to do. As I like to say, we've taken a bunch of snapshots, but we'd like to be able to show video in the future. And finally, I should note that there are essential communications equipment in this building, as at 370J, that is integral to the operations of Metro North in the Grand Central train shed and MTA PD operations, and we need to work to relocate that equipment. We have a preliminary budget for that piece of the work of about $20 million, and that's a couple of years project. Our overall timing here, our hope is to do this in the next 2 to 3 years. That is to say, to be out of this building and to be able to consummate a transaction here in 2 to 3 years. I think we will endeavor in every way possible to expedite that process, but I hope that's a realistic assessment of what it takes to do this. In some ways, this is only the beginning of a very extensive effort, but in others it represents the culmination of a good deal of work that's been done to date. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to acknowledge some people who have been involved in this. First, I'd like to thank Diana Ritter, who is going to have an important and ongoing role in coordinating all this, as it has very significant HR and IT implications, obviously. And from real estate, I'd like to acknowledge Mike Bader and Andrew Greenberg and Phil DiCaprio and Steve Pirelli, who have worked very hard on this. We've had great support from all the agency presidents and on down. I'm afraid I'll leave some people out, but I do want to specifically mention Anthony Fabrizio at Transit, who has been particularly tireless in supporting this effort. So thanks for that, and I'd be glad to take questions or comments.
What about the Brooklyn site that was mentioned by downtown?
370J is not a moving piece in this particular plan to vacate Madison Avenue and to increase our density at 2 Broadway. Well, because that's a major renovation project involving consideration of the communications equipment and so on. We have not determined to what extent it's cost effective for us to do that project, to be there. We're working very actively with the city to figure out what the full range of options is. We might be in that building in part, not in whole. I think at 2 Broadway we have base building systems that are intact. They're new. They're functioning. They're well functioning. They're well maintained. They have additional capacity, and we have an ability there to add, say, 500 seats through an expenditure that's comparatively modest in the scheme of things. We're thinking maybe $20 to $25 million. It'll depend on how ambitious we are there in rearranging the furniture. But we're talking about fit-out work there, which is fundamentally very different and can be done, in a much shorter time frame.
Is there an actual analysis of that site that's been done in Brooklyn? I mean, because we lease that space for $1 a year, as I understand it.
We lease the site for $1 a year. That's right. That's right. And there have been there.
Lost to us from downtown, I would imagine, a considerably more for the lost opportunity for the building.
Well, I think the point is that we have sunk costs and fixed costs at 2 Broadway that are what they are, and the objective is to leverage those costs more effectively at relatively little marginal cost.
I'd like to see numbers that back up your assertions.
We can certainly show you what our cost estimates have been for 370J. I will say the plan had never been to move headquarters there. The plan had been to build it out, to relocate facilities that had been that have leases expiring in the out years that are listed in the exhibit to the report. The various leases out in the boroughs that are expiring in 15, 16, 17.
Plans change all the time.
That's right.
Jeff, I think one of the issues you said, Jay, is as part of the, I'm sorry, thank you, as part of the master plan, when do you think you'll be able to get back to us with sort of a plan for 370J?
As I say, I think I think that's a joint effort between us and the city, and we met about it last week. Meeting about it again next week. It's got to be months. I don't think it's weeks, but we're looking to come to a conclusion there.
One thing, Jeff, I think it's very obvious in listening to Alan and John's comments and your comments that's the second piece of this puzzle. You know, the long-term 5-year plan or whatever you want to call it is certainly J Street. And I do think whether it's a month or 2 months or 3 months, we need to have a definitive plan for that Brooklyn area, the same as we have for the Madison Avenue area. And I think that's what everybody's alluding to. So I do think within a reasonable period of time, as part of your plan here, you need to do the J Street thing and get back to this committee and decide how we're going to pursue it.
No, absolutely. As I indicated at the outset, I think that is one of several items we want to come back and report to you.
Right, but it's an ongoing. It's going to be before we're through with this whole real estate makeover. This is going to be addressed, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Sure.
Jeff, the signal and communication equipment that's at 370J, can that be moved to Livingston Street?
There had originally been a pretty detailed plan to move it to Livingston Street. I think that's not the cost-effective way to do it. They're looking at moving it down into the subway station at J Street, which I think is going to cost less, but it's still very, very costly.
Thanks.
You know, one of the things, just thinking about this, I think as part of the real estate plan, maybe not every month now, Jeff, when you bring all the, the properties and so forth, lease arrangements to the finance committee, maybe every other meeting, I think we should get an update. I don't think we should go for 6 months or a year, since this is a major thing now going on for the agency. We need to, as fiduciaries, everybody sitting around here, need to get a report from you. I don't say we do it every single month. I'll leave it up to you as things happen here, though, and to follow up on the whole 5-year plan or whatever you want to call it. We need to schedule this at least bi-monthly. Just an update. Doesn't have to be a long time-consuming thing, but to bring us up to date on things like J Street, on things like, what's happening here in the whole 9 yards. So
Sure.
I think you have to add another part of your report. Is that what everybody would like to see to the Finance Committee on a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis?
Sure. I'd be very glad to.
Does anybody else? So this is just the beginning of this, obviously. So if there's no questions now, I mean, we will certainly make this part of our agenda. And since Jay had moved the real estate to the Finance Committee some time ago, I mean, we've been working on this, and this is really the opening, not the opening shot, because a lot of work's been done here, but this is an ongoing process that this Finance Committee has to monitor now going forward.
Thank you, Andrew.
Jeff, very good, excellent.
Thank you.
We look forward to some exciting things here. Doug, I think is that on the agenda? Yes, I'd like a motion, please, then to call to adjourn the meeting. Second, please. All in favor? Thanks a lot. It was an excellent meeting.